how do you budget during this time, and what type of steps? I mean, being frugal, Jennifer knows I am just about the most frugal person you could ever meet. She's like, I'm so cold in my house. I'm like, I'm so hot because I hate turning on the air conditioning and spending money. But that's not enough to get you to financial independence. So what's your strategy? How do you do it? How do you track it? Are there apps? Tell me everything.
There's so many different ways to go about that. So the way that I went into, I started the Fifth Wheel PT website back in 2016. And mostly the reason I started that was to actually talk about finance, because that was my biggest passion at the time. It still probably is, even more than physical therapy or travel. And so I wanted to write about that, and I wanted to write about my journey to financial independence. And I had like this plan kind of sketched out. And it almost became like an obsession to get there as quickly as possible, which was kind of crazy. But along that way, I came up with my own way to budget. And I do not like to track every expense and budget everything down to the dollar. I think that's tedious and annoying. That's just me, though. I know a lot of people do that and they do well with it. Instead, what I have always done is I'll just have a goal savings amount that I want to save each month or each week. As a traveler, you get paid weekly. So I'll have a weekly amount that I want to save, and I just take that right off the paycheck, and then I just spend whatever's left. And then anything that's left after that month, I just add that additional amount into savings. And it almost became a game of, okay, I take this amount off the top, I spend what's left. How much can I have left over after that to put that additionally into savings? So instead of, having a place for every dollar to go, I just take it off the top, spend whatever's left over, and that works better for us. So it's not so tedious to budget everything.
So coming from just a completely different, I just had no financial knowledge or background when we got into this. I think I can speak for some people who are in the same place as I was, where you just don't understand numbers, you don't understand budgeting and this sort of thing. But the biggest thing that I learned from Jared's knowledge and just reading and learning from starting from zero, going up in my financial knowledge, is you have to look at what we call the big ticket items. There's no point in sitting there, and there's not that there's no point, but don't start with things like your grocery bill and your clothing allowance and your spending money for going out that weekend. You have to start with, how much money am I putting out every month? How much in bills am I required to pay? You have to look at your big ticket expenses to start with. And I think that's how we were able to really get into such a good financial position without even one bit considering how much does the Starbucks coffee cost, or for me, can I afford that $50 dress? I didn't start there. I started with, how much money are we spending on rent, car payments, any debts that you have, that kind of thing. So as I mentioned earlier, we were fortunate that we didn't have any types of debts other than student loan debts. So that's just a huge thing right there. A lot of people are like, oh, well, I have my car payment and my mortgage and my credit card payment and that sort of thing. So the first thing is just get rid of if you have any kind of credit card debt, absolutely you have to pay that off before you can really start saving, because you're paying 20% in interest on that. The next thing would be, if you have control over where you live, whether it's your mortgage or your rent, look at trying to live in a lower cost of living place. Because that's how we really got to where we are financially when we were travelers. Hopefully you guys are familiar with your listeners are familiar with the concept of a tax home, but we maintained a tax home at our family's house. So we paid for a room in a house rather than paying a full rent, full bills, full mortgage. Huge budget item there is your rent. Neither of us owned new cars. We both owned used cars. So right there, if you're just taking out those big ticket items, as we call them, you have so much money left over that it's easy to save, in my opinion. I never thought about budgeting. I never thought about pinching pennies because we just weren't spending.